Hey everyone, just wanted to send this video out to you for this coming Sunday school lesson. And this week we are looking over Unit 17, Session 3. And this Sunday we're going to be in the book of Ezra. And the main theme for this lesson is being in the will of God, what it means to be in the will of God. How are we to be in the will of God? And how do we succeed in that, and just the joy we find when we do live out our lives following God's will. Um, but I want to start with the first point, which is God's proclamation helps His people obey, and this is going to be in Ezra 4:24 through 5:2. So we're going to see that God has brought His people out of exile, but instead of building up his temple and his kingdom, they decided to focus more on themselves. They got distracted by their own desires when God had told them to um, go build a temple for Himself. Um, well, they got focused on their own desires, rather their own will, rather than God's. Um, and one of the questions in this section is, what kind of things distract us from God's will? And I think this is a big topic for kids because a lot of times we get focused on our own desires, what we want. And I've told kids many times about my story of how I chose to go do what I wanted to do with my life. And I went to go play college football and do all these things when I was called by God to go into ministry. And I chose to choose my own desires rather than God's. And a lot of times we can get that way. Even sometimes unintentionally, we get so focused on what we want rather than lean on God to help us follow what He has commanded us to, what His will is for us on His life. Um, but sometimes it can be hard. It can be hard for us to trust God because it might not line up with what we thought we would be doing for the rest of our lives. But let's challenge our students to know when we are following God's will, He helps us obey that command. He is the one that gives us the strength to know He is in control. His will is better than ours. And we should be good to just trust and obey. And He is the one that will help us obey, even though it is going to be tough for us. Moving on to the second point here, it's God's provision helps His people succeed. And this is going to be Ezra 6:13 through 15. Um, and in this, it asks, what kinds of situations in our culture should we avoid in order to follow God's will? There are things in our culture that we see that will take us away from God's will, and a lot of that comes with social media today. Things that we see, we have influencers all over telling our students what they should believe, and it distracts them from really what the will of God is. Um, and they have so many people telling them what is supposed to be right, and it affects what they think they should be doing in life, what the will of their life is, but it is not what God's will is. So we need to avoid the things in our lives that are pulling us in the opposite direction of God's will for us. Um, and the thing about following God's will is, like I mentioned before, it's not easy. And it feels like it's extremely hard. And that's the thing with following God's will, is most of the time it is not easy. It is going to be a lot harder than choosing to do what you think is right. But God helps us succeed in those things. He helps us succeed in His will, because it is not by our power that we are able to do any of these things. It is by His power. So He challenges us and gives us things that we might think is impossible or too hard for us to do, but by His power, He equips us and blesses us to um, follow through with His will. So God, He provides our success. It is not by our power, but it is by God's power. And then the last point is God's power helps His people rejoice. And that's Ezra 6:16 through 22. Now we think about um, the good, we think about the bad in this, the challenges that these people were facing, um, but also the joy they experience in this. See, when you go through when you're following the will of God, there are going to be challenges in your life, and those challenges are difficult. But we can look back and say, okay, God used these hardships. He used these times in my life that were difficult, um, but He made them good, and we can rejoice in that. He is our joy. We can look in our lives and say, yeah, we have joy because God is a good, merciful, gracious God. And even though it was hard, I'm so glad that I was able to go through those because I see how God has used this for good. And we have joy in that. And see, I tell the students when I talk about my life and how I've messed up by not doing good in school, doing all these things and kind of messing my future up. And it seemed like um, each one of those steps that I did that was not in God's will, it led me to where I am today. And now that I am in God's will, I see the difference because when I was outside of God's will, my life was in shambles. I was not doing what I was supposed to do. I was depressed, anxious, just very lonely, and it was a rough time in my life. But as soon as I decided to follow God, be obedient to His calling on my life, to His will, I saw a complete change in my life, and it was just a complete shift for me. And the joy that comes with that is amazing. So for our students, it's like, yeah, following God's will is not going to be easy, and it's not easy for me, but it is a whole lot better. It's a whole lot better. I found myself to be happy, to be joyful, to be thankful to God that I went through those hardships, and now I don't have to go through those anymore. I can follow God and know that I have joy because He is a good God. So that's what we want our students to understand is if you are following God and obeying Him and what He has commanded you to do, your life might not be easy. You might have things that come up and are difficult to get through. But because God loves you, because He has a great plan for you, you can have joy in knowing that He is going to love and protect you. And He is a God that cares for you. So all of our students are looking for answers of this joy. Where can I find joy? And they'll turn to outside sources, turn to people who will give them this fake sense of satisfaction or gratitude, and they thrive for that. But the problem with that is when they search those things, it leaves them wanting more. And so we want to be able to tell them that joy you are searching for, that peace you are looking for, you will never need to keep searching. You will have everything that you need if you turn to God and stay in His will. So that's the lesson for this week. I hope you guys are good with this content and look forward to seeing you all this Sunday. And we just thank you all for teaching our students, and we'll see you soon.